some people are feeling ostracized. Some people are feeling unheard. Some people are just completely confused. Other people are thinking in the most ungodly of ways. And so we just wanted to settle that in a way that was charitable and warm, and using technology as a means to push that content out.
Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest.
Hey, it's Oshawa Hawthorne here with Brilliance Labs, and I got my buddy Pastor Gabe Kolstad.
Hello. Good to see you.
And here's Pastor Thomas Terry in the house.
How's it going, brother?
Good to see you.
Thanks
this
for
is
having
my pastor on the
Awesome.
east side of Portland at Trinity Church. Thomas, would you introduce yourself to the audience and just tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Thomas, and I'm a full-time pastor, lead pastor at Trinity Church in Portland, where I serve with 5 other men. We are in the kind of epicenter of Portland, off Sandy and 30th. I've been a lead pastor now for about 6 years. Prior to being a full-time pastor, I was a full-time executive director of a ministry called Humble Beast, where I sought to serve creatives and help creatives live at the intersection of creativity and theology. So I have a big heart for creatives. I want to see them flourish, both in the church and outside of the church. I want to help them to not find their identity in their creative work, but use it for human flourishing. So I've been doing that for, I don't know, like 15 years or so. So we've made records and we've done conferences and helped to publish books and things of that nature. And so, yeah. So that's kind of my world. I've also spent about 12 years or so traveling the country with a hip hop trio called Beautiful Eulogy, where we sought to both evangelize a lost world and encourage the saints across the country and even the world, hope to some degree. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So I've been a fan for a while. I don't remember what year this would have been. It was at the Hinson Annex when Door of Hope was there. There was a Beautiful Eulogy, Josh Garrels propaganda concert, and I was a fanboy, and I'm like, I'm gonna go check these guys out. They're in town. So I've been following you for a while. The projects have been kind of dormant. Do you have anything that you're cooking up that you can give a little hint about?
There are some things cooking up, but I can't really talk about it just yet. But there's some really exciting things that are kind of on the horizon. Yeah, that's about as much as I can say.
Exciting things on the horizon.
Yeah.
Are we talking like dropping in the summer? 24?
Yeah, so I would say starting in August. There are some things that will be dripping out from August to
Okay.
forward. So
Awesome.
yeah.
As a fellow Portland area pastor, we all experienced quite a shock in 2020, and obviously the whole world did. I think our situation was a little longer than most of the country with lockdowns and stuff.
Yeah. Activity in the streets and
there was all that too, right? Especially probably not far from where your church is located. I'm
Yeah.
sure that was a really interesting time
Indeed.
for you guys. Kind of curious because having heard much about you and your ministry, and in fact, those who are listening are probably don't know, but you're hearing a little bit of Humble Beast work in even this podcast. And so I've heard a lot about you guys, but I'm kind of curious a little bit about, what was your approach in lockdown in terms of your pivot in ministry and in the way that you were then serving your congregation, and would you now, looking back at that, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for every pastor, when your city's locked down and your members cannot come together, that requires a lot of thought, and there's a whole lot of challenge there.
Yeah.
I think I was used to kind of thinking outside of the box. Obviously, when you're working with, creatives, you have financial limitations, you have regional limitations, you have all these limitations, and part of being creative is thinking through how to work with what you got. And so one of the things that we thought about when we were initially locked down is, man, how do we continue to serve our people, minister to them? We knew everybody's just kind of nervous or full of anxiety. And how do we bring God's word to bear on their unique challenges that we're all facing? And so we decided to just kind of step into filming our services. But we opted to not go the route of live streaming, but actually produce our services. And so our congregation is very, for lack of better words, we would be considered mere, right? So not a lot of flash, but we have a lot of creatives in our congregation. And so we pulled out cameras, we pulled out lighting, and instead of, kind of showcasing, one person, we decided to try and film it with a sense of longing. So we actually filmed, opposite of, front facing the pulpit, but actually turning it a bit so you could see empty seats.
Okay.
We wanted to help people realize that this is not how our life together is meant to be. So this is only temporary until we can come back together again. So the focal point was not necessarily on the stage, but on the emptiness and the space in the room to create longing, so that people felt simultaneously ministered to, but felt like, I miss it and I want to be there. It was produced well. I mean, we had obviously guys who are really good with film, shooting it, filming it. We would, spend about 20 hours of filming, another 20 hours of editing. We were very intentional with creating a sense of beauty, because a lot of our Sunday services are centered around beauty and simplicity. And so we wanted the video content to kind of capture that, so that people felt like, though you're not here, I still feel connected with what our body looks like and feels like and sounds like. And so yeah, we did that for as long as we felt comfortable.
How long? How long did you do that?
So we did that for probably 3 months.
Okay.
And that was being dropped out. We kind of built a website that was like Trinity at Home.
Okay.
And we provided, curriculum for the children to download. Our congregation is very liturgical, so we approached the filming very liturgical. So we had a call to worship, we had a confession and pardon. God consecrates us with the word, and then a benediction. We had all those aspects as part of the service together. So when people were sitting in their living room, our aim was to teleport them beyond their living room. And,
it was intuitively engaging at that point then, because they had a part in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, we just had this whole kind of thing. It's obviously not the way things were meant to be, but we tried really hard to work within our limited capacities. But I started to feel, probably after 2.5 months, as I was consistently engaging with congregants and trying my best to be on the phone with them and then Zoom calls, I started to realize that the more people were kind of away from the church, our gathered community, the more problems in their lives started happening. So anxiety, depression, people diving into pornography, just like you name it. Yeah. Our people were feeling the stress of it. And I started to look at the city's kind of hypocritical nature in terms of how they were treating church. So for example, strip clubs were open, bars were open, marijuana dispensaries were open, but the churches were closed. And I'm not a very political person, but I think after 3 months, I just decided, no, not doing it. My people are too important to me. So we're just going to open up the church. Now we're not going to make a big deal about it. We're not going to fight the government. We just said, no, we're just going to meet. And I think that was one of the best things we could have done. Pastorally, I felt it was fundamentally necessary to have our people together, for 2 reasons. One, because of the spiritual decline of isolation and depression, the sense of unknownness of what's happening with our world. And then two, and we could talk about this in greater degree, but just the hyperpolarization that was happening in our context. I just felt like, you know what? I need to bring them together. That there needs to be a sense of unity for us to survive as Christians in this crazy upside down world. So like after 3 months, we were just done.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
Yeah.
So you feel like that you'd still stand by what you guys did there?
Yes, I probably would have put more emphasis on the communication of the why.
Okay.
In our attempt to, we are fighting this polarization.
Mm-hmm.
And so we felt like calm was, if we were explicit about calm, one demographic of people were going to be very upset. And then if we don't do anything, another demographic of people were going to be very upset. So we felt like, okay, we're just going to be very low key with what we communicate for the sake of unity.
Mm-hmm.
I probably would have, in retrospect, I would have pushed in a little bit more on some of those comms and maybe deal with some of the fallout, but at least it maybe would have been more helpful.
So didn't you guys do, I remember an interview with Virgil Brown to talk about race and what it's been like for him as a Black pastor in Portland, navigating that whole experience and the George Floyd and all that. Is that something that you would have pushed more into? You're saying?
Oh, absolutely. Things like that for sure. When I mean calm, I mean like our rationale for pulling people together and opening up the doors. I think the lack of calm created a perception among some members that we were just being like anti-government.
Sure.
And, that tends to have a very politically driven response. And I wish I would have taken the time to clearly define, this is not a political decision. This isn't us like saying we don't care about the government. We don't want the government imposing on the church. I could have spent more time unpacking. This is a church issue. Like our people are suffering in isolation. The makeup of our congregation, we're filled with singles.
Okay.
We have a lot of singles in our church. No family, kind of isolated on their own. And so those people needed to be connected to the body so that they could feel connected and feel known and feel like hopeful in a world that is just full of despair. And but because we didn't want to be perceived as political, we were just very quiet with how we did it. And I think that was challenging. Now, when you're talking about engaging some of the, kind of social issues of our city, we wanted to speak about those things. And of course, we couldn't bring our congregation together at that time because we were in the thick of the quarantine. And so instead what we did is we pulled Virgil in, and I think we pulled Michael Lawrence in, and we wanted to talk with Virgil about, how should we be thinking about these things, both biblically and emotionally and relationally? Like, how can we have a conversation so that we can inform not just our conversation, like our local church community, but how can we inform, other congregations to be thinking about these things? And so we felt like that was absolutely necessary. So on one side, we didn't want to be overly communicative concerning like the, government's overreach, but in another sense, we wanted to be overly communicative concerning the way we relate with each other in this, turmoil moment where some people are feeling ostracized, some people are feeling unheard, some people are just completely confused, other people are thinking in the most ungodly of ways. And so we just wanted to settle that in a way that was charitable and warm. And using technology as a means to push that content out because we were all in isolation. So technology at that point was wonderful. was a great resource.
I'm kind of curious how, like, because it sounds like you were very intentional about some of that communication, particularly around relationship.
Yeah.
How do you see now, like years later, the residual benefit of that work? And if so, how did that shape and, help develop your church community?
So I think that the fact that we could create content to engage them when they could not gather with us, I think was super helpful. But we broke that quite quickly because I tend to believe that technology, and I'm just going to be careful with how I say this, but I think technology can become a great barrier to the very tactile and local connectedness of a church. It's technology kind of creates a context where people can engage with content on their own terms. They can, kind of sit in their living room, and when they feel it's comfortable, they can, kind of turn on and plug in. And I saw some benefit during the pandemic for that. But I think real Christianity, healthy Christianity, is not just the dissemination of content, but it's how the community, the whole of the community, comes together to love and serve and dialogue and create a sense of. So for example, with these conversations concerning race, as soon as we could, we got our people together so that we could begin unpacking these things in a community sense, in a localized sense. Because when you're just dropping content and you're pushing it on social media has a way of, because of algorithms, pushing this content into one pocket or another pocket. And then that content exists in other pockets of content, and it's just creating this hyper polarization.
Your next up video, right? You might be watching this really positive, biblically grounded message, and then it pops up with totally something off the wall,
like
right?
We hate CRT, or CRT is evil, or on the other side, it's like, well, if you're addressing any issues concerning race, then your church has gone woke, and it's just like, wait, what? My aim was like, brothers and sisters, let's not allow for algorithms and technology and space to determine how we relate with each other. Let's come together and let's have a conversation. Because when we're all together, like, we see each other, we speak differently. When we're like in our living rooms in our own silos and we're just kind of typing things, there is no
completely different, right?
Yeah, it's totally different. And so I just wanted to break that. And it's not that I don't see value in technology. I do. But when it comes to the local church, I feel like it serves more, it's more dangerous than it serves benefit, at least from my particular vantage point. And so I was pretty quick to crush it, so as to facilitate a larger group of people feeling like, well, I can't get it at home anymore, so I'm forced to go in. So we cut streaming quite quickly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. We just cut it. And we said, while I understand why some churches do that, and to that, I'm like, amen. But to my specific congregation, I felt like it was a pastoral issue. There were people that were going to become quite comfortable kind of tuning in, plugging in at their earliest convenience and not prioritizing the local church. And I just felt, nah, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to force you to engage with people, because part of our life together is coming together and serving one another and practicing our one anothering, and you just can't do that with a screen that is separating us. I mean, we have members in our congregation still to this day. I think of one woman in particular, Jill. She's been in isolation for 3 years. Because of her unique challenges. She's an elderly lady, bound in a wheelchair, and she's in a community that doesn't allow for her to come to our congregation. And we hate that.
Yeah.
And we know that she hates that. So we deploy people to go to her. And so to the best that we can, for a little while, we couldn't do anything but stand outside of her window and sing hymns together with her outside of the window. And now they let her come, and we have to stand, 15 feet, and we just try as little as we can to engage more and more and more. Now we can do side hugs and, but the point is, that's not how our life was meant to be. Mm-hmm. Right. And I had seen the consequences of siloing out our people and allowing for them to live in isolation. And I just said, nah, man, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bold.
Yeah. So let's stir that up a little bit. Let's agitate this complexity, because there's different benefits and drawbacks, right? So with technology, you miss that human element, you miss that interaction. I mean, I just think of like the comment section on a YouTube video. Like, imagine if that was the whole sum of your church fellowship, right? This disembodied like trolling, and honestly, right? That Christian Facebook and Twitter became that over the lockdowns and stuff. And so, but then you also have this idea of, hey, now the gospel's being broadcast, and you hear all these stories about all these churches that were forced to go digital during the lockdowns. And all of a sudden now people that wouldn't in themselves, right, darken the door of a church, they're pulling up some trending YouTube video, and it's someone preaching the gospel. So I wonder, Gabe, if you just interact or tease out a little bit of what you guys did, how you leaned into the digital online space, and maybe what are some of the benefits or drawbacks that you've been feeling as you do that.
Okay, yeah. I mean, for sure. So when COVID, hit all of us, but thankfully we're over 3 years past that now.
Yeah. Amen.
But it did last a long time. And so, as we sat and tried to reflect quickly, I remember when everything happened, my wife and I were in Indonesia, and we were not sure we were going to be able to come home. And so Friday the 13th was the day that everything was announced, and we knew that churches weren't going to be able to meet. I remember being on the phone with our team going like, I'm out of town. What are we supposed to do about this? And so they just decided, well, we're going to take it all online. And it was the right thing to do. We eventually, within a couple of weeks, kind of had a rhythm of what we were going to do, and so we decided to just kind of like go full bore, similar to what you guys did. Mm-hmm. Probably not as many hours of filming, but still a lot of effort and energy into that. And we started kind of developing a little bit more. The question really that I have is, are you sure you can't develop community digitally? You know what I mean? And so we started teasing out that question.
I'm not sure about that.
And we have seen some of it, digital community in terms of even people serving on digital teams that still continues to this day. We've really pressed into that. I mean, and so we prioritized digital. We decided that we were going to go digital first, and we've stayed in that space of like, let's say we're going to do something. We got to make sure that even if we're doing an activity or a program or whatever, that we have to think through the digital aspect of it first. That's been our approach, simply because for us, it was a new opportunity. And, we were thinking evangelistically about that. Have there been tremendous drawbacks for it? Yes, absolutely. And I think we all could probably resonate with the frustration of if it's super easy to keep connecting online, there are going to be a lot of people that don't make the effort to engage in community beyond what was very comfortable during the pandemic. And so I would say we've noticed still a lot of people that we wish would engage more in biblical community. I'm convinced that there is such a thing as community digitally, but I think it's going to obviously have limitations. And if it's all only digital, that's a problem. If it's not local, I think, so for me, local matters. And I think local is really the value that I even hear you talking about when you're thinking, pull people together. Because why? Because then we're actually in a space together. So when you've got somebody who's only, let's say, connecting across the country with a church online, and they don't have any expression of a faith community in their own actual space that they live, major limitations there. Mm-hmm. But I think, the question is, can you develop it to the point where those things can become symbiotic? And so there's some glimpses for us that we're seeing those things.
Do you have a sense, percentage-wise? I think you said you had like 500 people last week streaming your service, connecting.
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
Yeah. So do you have a good sense? Are there like a certain percentage of COVID holdouts that are local, formerly Meet Space participants, and now they're just either because like serious health issues or just like, I'm just afraid to go out of my house. So there's holdouts. Are these new connections that are like that you're trying to pull them into Meet Space, but they're seekers or they're not ready? Or is it like even mission, like someone in Indonesia, right? That heard about it somehow and that's their connection to church. What
I mean, all of the above for sure. I think one of the things that has happened with church attendance is that it's become less frequent. So let's say somebody's part of your church, Trinity Church, in their definition of I'm active and I attend and I gather with this church family has changed over the last few years. And I think COVID was part of the contributing factor to that. So now we're down to something like 1 in 6 weeks is considered active engagement in a church community.
No, this is what you guys are seeing at West.
No, this
West
is
Side,
or
is this
like a national trend?
Wow.
And we've seen it. We've seen it. Absolutely, we've seen it because you're just not seeing the same. You know, you say however many people come and are a part of a church gathering on a weekend. Well, the real thing we should be measuring is how about every 6 weeks if we want to know who's engaged. So I think one of the things that I would say the upside to digital is between those 6 weeks, there's a lot more connection than there used to be. And so that's a good thing. But the most frustrating aspect of that whole thing for me personally is that there are people who very well could be engaging in person. They live 2 miles from our facility, right? They're healthy. There's no problem with they've got family. They've got kids. They could be engaging in a very significant community, but it's just easier to flip on the screen and check the box. You know what I mean? That's the really, really frustrating and I think the downside of it. So in that sense, are we developing lazy disciples? Yes. And can you even call a lazy disciple a disciple? That's the other question. But the upside would be then if you could see the opportunity as mission, and like one example of where I see great news in this is like we've had several people move out of state. I bet nobody has moved out of state from your congregation, right? Everybody loves they just want to stay here, right?
Idaho and Florida,
Texas. Don't forget Texas.
Yeah.
I know. So people moving out of state, and moving to places that literally, and we've tried to help them connect, they don't have a local church that's vibrant, viable near them. And so what's now happening is the birth of like a house church network, where one example in Wisconsin is Mark and Jessica. They might be listening or watching right now. They have decided to go plant a house church with, the stream, with the Sunday stream, and they're creating a community out of it. And they communicate with me. There's like, they've got these neighbors are like, hey, pray for this guy, pray for this woman. She just moved in. Pray for, hey, I met this woman at the post office and then the grocery store, this other person. And they're like, and they're all coming over on Sunday for lunch and church. And like, those things are happening. So there's the upside of it, right? That there's no way, because they wouldn't be connected to a church if it wasn't for that, because there isn't one. And now they're using that as an outreach opportunity to see more and more disciples made. So I think that's been our approach, for better or worse. I know there's downsides, but the upsides to us are really, really strong. So we're pursuing it still.
I wonder if there was a way. So what I hear you saying is that there's a great mission and evangelism component to streaming the services. I wonder if there was a way to kill the stream, thereby forcing those people who are on the fringes of coming, who can come, to then, trickle back into the services to feel a part of the life together, while using technology to create resources that get pushed out in media that serve the same end.
It could be, but it would be asynchronous. And I'm not against the asynchronous thing. We're experimenting that. What I mean by that is it's disconnected from time. It's not real time. the advantage, I think, so we're trying as best as we can to steward and foster relationships during the experience of the stream, so that somebody can ask for live prayer, so that somebody can, interact with other live people who are there, and I know that God can use anything. And so that, to me, I'm just like sitting here appreciating your approach, appreciating what you've done and the reasoning behind it, and realizing the value of that. And I think for me, I can learn from that, and I can mine out of you, like maybe we need to ask better questions in some areas, so
I think similarly, brother, like the way that you guys have been able to find engagement online, that's really hard for me to understand how to do that. So to figure out how you lock that down, having maybe other pastors on a chat thread where you're actually praying for people and pulling them in, that's just something I never even thought of when we were doing it. I was just, I'm going to cut the stream. I want people in the building.
Well, and you know what? So when we got into the thick of this, I felt led to make 2 declarations, and we stuck with them through the pandemic. So for us, we were not meeting for 9 months. So you did not meet for 3 months. We did not meet for 9 months. So we kind of had to do enough to keep people really engaged for 9 months.
Right.
So the 2 declarations were, we were going to honor the authorities, and we were going to protect the vulnerable. And so for us, we just thought, okay, then that means if we're going to honor the authorities, we're going to do what's asked of us. I mean, unless somebody's telling us you can't preach the gospel, then we're going to just go with it, right? Part of it for us was some of the connections and the serving opportunities we've got in our community sort of depend on not being spiteful toward the government. And I'll be honest, it was super difficult for those 9 months, super difficult. And even when we opened up, it's like you could have 25 people in a gathering, and so then the time intensive it was like the exact opposite of economy of scale. So it was so labor intensive to do those things.
When you could have like 25 people in the building.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Because you're, it's all the work of, you could have 500 people in it, but you couldn't do it. So, I mean, I think for us then having that long runway of 9 months of having to just forced us to go, we got to have a relational discipleship team that is hybrid. It's digital and it's physical.
Yeah.
And they have to always be on, And so then they just started recruiting people from the congregation. We got a psychologist that's on that team, and just different people that are like,
That's great.
I want to, so if we're getting somebody's online as an example, and their first time connection, then we do a personal outreach, as long as we've got contact information. It's a personal outreach. It's
not a phone call, a Zoom call.
It's a text or a phone call. If it's just an email that we get, then it's an email, but hopefully it goes to phone number, because then we can get more personal. But then, the goal, and so I think one of you used the meet space thing. The goal would be like, how personal can we take this? Can we get to coffee?
Yeah.
And so that's been always the goal.
So that's what I was going to ask. I want to, maybe you guys can both riff on this. So I don't know if you've read the old school book called Reformed Pastor by Richard Baxter. And by reformed, he's not talking about theology. He's talking about a spiritual renewal and transformation. But one of the kind of the ministry models he talks about in that book is the house call. And just puts a lot of emphasis on the pastoral house call, and how when that pastor has his parish and his community, and that responsibility that he has to shepherd, and there's an accountability for each of those church members. So a high value of church membership and a high value of that one-on-one time. And he talks through the importance of asking spiritual questions, of checking on the spiritual state of that member's soul. I wonder, like, right over COVID, a lot of us in working had to move to Zoom, right? And you had Zoom meetings now, and even like Zoom conferences instead of flying across the country. And I'm curious, like, even for those folks that live 2 miles down the street, are there house calls? Are there home communities? Are there regular Zoom calls where there really where you have someone there, hey, I love you, I know you, I'm asking how your soul is doing. Have you guys been able to feed that out or seeing that growing even for those people that are staying in the digital space?
That's a great question. And I can only answer it anecdotally, personally on our side, is that we have seen the return of in-person like community groups really succeed. And so finally, but it's taken forever, to get to that point. So finally we hit like what we would consider to be a health metric of that just this spring. And so it's exciting to see the craving of in-person community. And just, anecdotally, I know some of the people in my head of like, I just wish you would engage on Sundays, but at least you are actually now in a group that's meeting in person, So there is that life on life connection. I can't say that it's across the board, but I see little glimpses of it, I wish it was more. Yeah.
Wow. You have any thoughts about that or how you, that focus on the local and physical helps you do that well?
Yeah, it would be really hard for me to feel connected with the congregation in a meaningful way, like over text messages or phone calls. I would even say Zoom would be really challenging because I think it's just, there's something that happens in person when a person is disarmed and feels loved and is able to then be honest about their situation, and there's touch and there's, brother, like, let me just help you walk through this. So it'd be really challenging for me. We've never been, so for Trinity Church, which is just our unique philosophy, our world orbits around our Sunday gathering. Like that is the quintessential, that's the greatest expression of our life together is on Sunday morning, because there's meaningful membership. People are coming together and they're serving one another and they're doing that kind of thing together. So there is a sense in which I am in every way dependent upon the other members to do some of that soul care. That's part of their responsibility to the church. And I would just be utterly destroyed if it was all dependent upon me and three other pastors. So kind of opening up those spaces to bring them in provides opportunity for the other members to do that soul care and that loving to one another, which is so vital. But again, if you don't have it, if people aren't coming in the doors, then I would probably think about deploying strategy to try and engage them. I think for us, the moment we turned the power off on the stream, like everybody just started coming back.
That's so
again.
good.
So it was just like, okay, I can spend, the vast majority of my time, which I think I could develop strategy. I do that for other folks. I do consulting for other folks. I could figure that out. Or I could just say, man, I just want to be preoccupied with bringing them in the door. So I'll turn off the power, and then God just kindly brought people back in. Now, I will say that when we started streaming, because we had never streamed before.
Same. Yeah. It was totally new for us.
Yeah. And that was by design, just because the world I come from is, marketing, film, video, just all of that. And so I, by design, never would introduce that into the life of our church.
Was that because you felt like that was secular and church was sacred? What for you was the reason why?
There is it's kind of like twofold. Okay. So there is a particular power, of persuasion when it comes to marketing and creating video content. And I have seen historically that the persuasive power of marketing and media doesn't produce long-term benefits. And so I just never wanted to introduce that into the life of a church. Secondly, I think that I have so we're very liturgical. And I want to create a space that many people would say we want to create a space that's inviting for people that they understand. So like, give me the TED Talk forum or the concert forum, and I can understand that.
Yeah.
For me, in a church space, in a post-Christian world, I'm actually trying to create a sense of transcendence. I want them to walk into a space where it's not like any other space on the planet.
That's great.
So
That's
there's
interesting perspective.
singing where they're hearing people singing. So the worship is actually subdued. So where they hear human voices, like one instrument singing, where there's a sense of liturgy that's moving them beyond the temporal and the here and now, because everything they look at in this world is broken. I want to lift their gaze upward and beyond to the hope of heaven. And I think it's really hard to do that when you're not creating any difference between the concert venue and the church venue. There should be something that makes people, particularly unreached, post-Christian culture coming into this world, they need to be able to say, like, man, I've never experienced this before. And I feel like that's been fruitful in our ministry, where people are like, man, I don't know where else I would go to experience what I'm experiencing here. And part of that, the biggest catch in that is the people, right? And I think so media and video and technology actually creates like space. It prohibits that from happening. So that's why I feel like it can be a great tool. And I'm not minimizing that tool at all. But when it comes to the local gathering, I see that not as a tool, but as a means that separates people. So we just
But you still have a haze machine, right?
definitely not. You walk into our space on a Sunday morning, and it actually, I think, and this is not, I'm not opposed to anybody particular philosophy of how they do church, but for us, we intentionally paint the walls white. We don't cover the stained glass windows. We don't have concert lighting with color. We have a very mere stage where the sound and volume is subdued. So it's people walk in there and they're just like, this is not like how a lot of the other churches are experiencing things. And for the type of people that are coming into our congregation, they see that as a value. They see that as a sacred space. Mm-hmm. And so it automatically pulls them into this space where they're warm enough to have those conversations. So I've found it to be very fruitful. And we've always had that dynamic. Mm-hmm. That's been the heartbeat of our church. And so implementing technology for me was like, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, okay.
But it was a necessary thing because our people couldn't gather together.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That is so interesting. I mean, like, I'm coming from the exact opposite perspective and experience. And, for us, it was like finally an excuse to dive in headlong into technology and try to make this as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. You know what I mean?
And maybe I could see that because part of my other world was completely immersed in technology.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of bifurcation in my mind. Like, this technology is created for resources and cultural engagement and mission and evangelism. This over here is our life together.
Yeah.
So they're just, they exist in two different spaces.
Yeah. Okay. Because I mean, like, I just honestly have questions on some of the statements that you made, like that. I love that. I actually resonate really with the transcendent environment comments that you made, because like when I'm, let's say, traveling in Europe and I step into one of those great cathedrals, my breath is taken away, and I love it. Mm-hmm. And
it was made for that very reason.
It was, and I love that. And I'm not sure that produces long-term change by itself, right?
Indeed.
So when you think somebody steps into a space and they go, I've never experienced this before, but you said that's because of the people. Yes. And so what if technology, I mean, because definitely technology can become an idol in itself, right? And it can become a barrier.
Indeed.
Or it can be a bridge. And I think that's, for me, I would just come at it from the complete opposite angle and say, for us, it's a bridge.
Yeah.
At least I think. And, in our experiences, those conversations, I've never experienced something like this before. Those are happening every week online and in person.
Yeah.
but the what they're experiencing is grace, community.
Yeah.
I'm understood. God loves me.
Amen.
And, probably I would look at this whole thing and go, maybe it's not one way is better than the other. Maybe it is. It takes all kinds of churches to reach all kinds of people.
Amen. And I definitely want to qualify by saying that is our unique philosophy. And it's not that we don't use technology. We do use lights. We just use less spotlights and more house lights.
Yeah.
Right. We use amplification. We just have our decibels are reduced so that the congregation can be the main instrument.
Yeah.
And I've seen those speakers. Those can pump,
we got
those can
banging
pump it
speakers.
out. Yeah.
We do concerts there.
Oh, yeah,
We
okay.
invite people to come and do concerts there because the sound system is it can bang.
Can do it. Yeah.
So, but when it comes to, so it's just, it's how we leverage the technology. It is saying, what is technology a utility that is bringing people in so that the congregation becomes the main kind of focus on how we're pointing each other to Jesus and how we're helping one another, encouraging one another to look to Jesus? Or does technology become the main thing that's making people feel a particular way and not know why they're feeling it? See, I have in my mind, I know how technology can make people feel things because I've been doing it for 25 years. So I'm very cautious with how I deploy technology so that what they're feeling is not inextricably connected to technology, but but their experience is being had in the community of people as they in oneness, like look to Jesus and exalt Jesus and praise Jesus. So it's not that we're anti-technology.
Right. No.
It's
But here's what I love
philosophically.
that you're doing is I love that you are intentional, and I would say maybe even beyond intentional, to artful about how you're taking that philosophy and putting it into expression. I think that's a really beautiful thing. And thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.